Hello, hello. Welcome to the Panda class. This class is all about value. So we're going to talk about value, what all that brings to a painting, and how that can kind of affect how your painting looks. And that, you know, black is not just black, white is not just white. It's kind of like life. There's a lot of in between. And so I want you to keep that in mind as you paint today. And I want you to start to see color in that way. I was looking for the definition so I could read it out to you. Value defines how light or dark a given color or hue can be. Values are best understood when visualized on a scale or gradient from dark to light. High contrast images have few tonal values in between stronger hues like black and white. And value is responsible for the appearance of texture and light in art. So that's why it's so important. One of the main things that I tend to talk about when I'm painting and teaching is that light is super important, as is darkness. And if you don't have that variant, your painting just appears flat. And I think value can be hard to vocalize often. And so what I have done is try to break that down a little bit easier and in ways that I do it at home. So for instance, today we'll start with our colors. You should have a pre-painted canvas. I told you yellow and red, I believe. And I think that's what came in the kits, is just yellow and red. I had done this one at some point, and so instead of just letting this waste, I'm going to use this one. So basically you could use anything. So if you have an old canvas that you painted on, you don't really like it and you want to paint over that, you can totally do that as well. That's what I do a lot. So what it does is just add a little bit of interest in the background that we're going to let peek through. But you can just do the yellow and red. You know, I often do just red. I was just trying something a little bit different. So that's how we got that. And this was just like leftover paint on my palette, I think, probably from when I did this, actually, because it has the same colors. So I just threw it on a canvas to have in the background. You can also tell it's been sitting on my desk, so there's splatters on it and all sorts of stuff. Doesn't matter. It's all going to get covered up for the most part anyways. And so for painting today, we have an orange. We have a really cool yellow, a white, a black, a violet, raw sienna, and Bahama, of course. So these are the colors I'm using. If you wanted to do different, you know, color flowers, you're more than welcome to do that. I like what all is happening with this painting. And people said it didn't photograph well. I think it's precious. It's one of my favorites, actually. So it's just this cute little panda hiding amongst flowers. And while the flowers are orange, they're not just orange. There's all these different shades within that flower to give that flower some interest. Same thing with green. They're not just green leaves. They have some yellow in them. They have some Bahama in them. So what I want you to do is approach each of these different areas and realize that you're going to have a bunch of colors within that element. And you can kind of think about the element on its own, and that may help you. Same thing. This is a panda. So your brain tells you a panda is black and white, but really he's not. He depends on how the light is, where the shadows are. He would appear to be a lot of different colors. And so we're going to try to capture that with paint. All right. So we have that one here, and then I had you print these off. If you, for some reason, don't know where to have them, if you're a Lush Art member, it's in the Lush or the Lush Club member, it's in the Lush Club page, and you just save it. It looks like this. It's the colored version. You would save it and print it, okay? Then on your phone, you will take it and make it black and white. And then I adjusted and the contrast a little bit so that the lights would be a little lighter and the darks would be a little bit darker, just so that I can see where those dark areas hit. So while this is black, this is not just white. It's got shadows to it. Okay. And on here, you can't really see how big of a difference it is. But right here you can. And this just helps, I feel like, get your eye in the right frame of mind for where these highlights and lowlights are. Same thing here, the light's hitting it right here. This is super bright. This is super bright. This is a lot more shadowy. This is like, that's his head. And then you're seeing just a little bit of his body go behind him and then fade into the flowers. So I love to do this with pictures. So if you have a subject that you're wanting to paint, if you will save the picture, print the picture in color, and then adjust the black and white to have a little bit stronger contrast, and then print that, it will help you see where those contrasts lie. And I think it just makes a really big difference. It's a great reference. I almost always paint with reference photos. I just think it helps me, it helps my brain. I mean, can I paint a panda without a reference photo? I mean, probably, but would it look correct? Probably not. So just keep that in mind. I have these that were sitting here that I just cleaned that have been in my dirty water forever. So I'm probably just going to use these. This is a kind of a smaller, it's a filbert, but a small flat would work. This is kind of a medium flat wash paint brush, and then a liner mainly just for like setting the eyes and the nose apart. We probably won't use it much other than that. And then you'll notice you did not get a pre-sketched canvas. That's because we're going to learn about layout here. Typically, I do not put something straight in the middle of the painting. This one became a lot more in the middle than I typically like, but that's just because I really wanted more of the sky. And so the way I have it broke down is, if you think about this in rule of thirds, 1, 2, okay? We want this rule of this third to be different. This third is different, and this third is different. So that's why he's kind of placed in the middle a little bit more so than how the photo has him, just because that didn't really work for my rule of thirds. And that is something that, I mean, I don't know, science, I don't know, somebody, you know, they have proven makes it more pleasing to the eye. It's the same reason I use odd numbers instead of even numbers. I just think it's more pleasant to the eye. All right, so we're gonna think about where he goes. I don't want you to stress about this. I don't want you to overthink it. I don't want it to be a problem. He's very simple shape, so we're not gonna get real worried and caught up in this. Now, I'm using the raw sienna and a little white to use as my kind of sketching. So it's just gonna become this like light tan color, okay? I don't need a ton of this color. Where is my squirt bottle? I bet it's by my plant. Oh no, it's right here. Okay. A little bit of water in there just to get it moving and grooving. And we don't want this to have a lot of texture because we're going to cover it all up. This is just there for sketching. So we're thinking of the rule of thirds. We're going to come down about a third, and his head is mostly flat. There's a little bit maybe of a curve to it, but for the most part, it's very flat. Okay. And then he has these ears that kind of are over to the side, and they're just, if you think about it in a way, they're just like an arc. Okay. And they go inside of the head, if that makes sense. Like here's the head, and they're going to come a little bit on the inside. Same thing. We're going to make another one. Now, if these are not perfect twins, is that a problem? No, because are your ears the same? No. I feel like these could be a little bit less round. I want them to be a little bit thicker. So all I'm going to do is, while I'm at this stage, thicken that over just a little bit. Okay. We're going to cover all this up so it doesn't matter. This is where we can make mistakes and get our sketch how we really want it to be. Now, same thing. He kind of puffs out right here. Okay. And then we can see a little bit of his body. So I'm going to go ahead and just put that in there so that we can remember that that is body. It actually is a little bit darker too. All right. And then he kind of comes over here, and then he kind of comes down just a little bit. So we're going to kind of do that. And you can't see most of what's happening here. So we're just going to make the other side sort of match. It's going to get covered up by flowers, so I'm not super worried about it, but I want you to be able to see, if we weren't putting the flowers, kind of how you could judge this and get to a bear-like shape, okay? So this is the bear's face. This is the little bit of body that you can see kind of poking through because of the way he's angled. Then he has his eyes. So his eyes are on either side of his head, and they kind of are in what I would call a peanut shape. Same thing, other side, you got kind of a peanut shape. And if you are concerned about this, you can kind of look at your ears. He's a little bit, his eyes start a little bit below that. The eye started a little bit higher on this one. It's not that big of a deal. If you made your peanut too small, just enlarge it a little bit. If you made your peanut too big, just make it a little bit smaller, and then you'll know where to add your panda around it. Okay, then about where this ends, we're gonna have a nose. Again, most of the nose is not visible because of flowers, because he's like down there sniffing the flowers. But we're gonna give him a nose shape that's kind of like that. It's a little rounded on the top, and these little corners are a little rounded. And that's it for the panda. That's all we have to sketch. So see, that wasn't hard. Now we're gonna lay in our flowers. So you can take your picture and you can lay in flowers as you see fit. I obviously didn't do all of these flowers picture for picture, flower for flower. And some of them I ended up adding later because it just needed a little bit extra. But all I'm gonna do is come in here and make some circles. Okay, I want my circles to be a little smaller than what I want my actual flowers to be, because this is just to lay it out. Okay, and so some of the time they're gonna go off canvas and we're gonna let them do that. Some of the time you're going to have empty space. You can put leaves there, so don't get worried about that. They can be different shapes and sizes, so they don't all have to be big. They don't need to be the same size. The ones closer to you would probably be larger, actually, with just how vision works. And I'm just going to go in here and lay these out. Will this one be just like that one? No. Actually, that goes up closer to that. That's going to cover up there. We're going to have, is that the one? Yeah, I think that's about right. And some of this will get adjusted as we lay it in, and we're like, that doesn't make sense. Which will happen, and that's going to be okay. A little bit more white in there so you can see where those are. This one is really pretty big, so we're going to go a little bigger here, and then we've got one here. And then there's one that kind of pops up over here. And they can be behind each other. There may be some that are like hidden behind others. Okay, so that's about it. Just some random circles. It should match on both sides. If it does match, throw in an extra flower somewhere. And then there may be areas where we may have to adjust this, but this is basically where we're going to start and how we're going to get going. Now, if you're watching this recording and you're like, oh my God, she's going so fast. All you have to do is push pause, catch up, and then restart it. And then we'll all be going together again. So don't get freaked out. That's what I really want to stress. The purpose of this is so that you learn layout, why layout's important, why value is important, so that when you're doing other paintings, you can add those to your painting to make them more interesting. I have probably said interesting in every class I've done, that we want it to be interesting. We don't want it to appear flat. The difference between a beginner painter and a painter that's been doing it for a while is a beginner painter thinks is purple. So if there's a purple flower, we're going to paint the whole flower purple. And that's the flower. And then maybe there's yellow in the middle. And they're going to take yellow straight from the tube, stick yellow straight in the middle. That's not what we're doing here. We want all these different tones, and we want to have a really good time with it. Okay. So that brush I'm going to put away, and I'm going to go get my larger flat brush. Okay. And we're going to work on our background first. I know, shocker. But we're going to let some of these background colors show. So if you look at the original, there are areas of the yellow and the red that then sometimes became orange that show through this back here. And so it kind of adds a little element of fun and interest, and we're going to keep that up. And so what is back there is white, violet, and Bahama. And again, we're not trying to paint the whole thing that, so we want parts of this to show. Now, I have some green up here. Green is probably the one color you're not going to often really find in the sky. So I'm probably going to mostly cover that area up. But I do want some of this red to show. I wish I had a little bit more yellow up there. It just wasn't how it worked. And so I'm going to grab a little white on my brush, just so that these colors stay pretty soft. And then I'm going to grab a little violet on my brush. So I have two colors, the violet and the white. And I said I was going to cover this up mostly. So I'm going to kind of come over here around these flowers and cover up most of that. And then I'm just going to kind of walk my way around. Some of that gets really light as the purple gets worked out. Then I can go get a little bit more of that violet. Okay. And I just have it here and there. Maybe put a couple places with the darker purple, just so that it can play with the Bahama when we go to that. Now, I'm going to wipe my brush off. I'm not going to clean it, but I'm going to wipe it off. And I'm going to go into the Bahama. And I'm going to go around these. And then some of the time, I'm going to just let some of that red breathe through. If you feel like you're covering it up, just try to use a light hand. And not a whole lot of paint on your brush, and see if that helps you achieve that so that some of that is peeking through. Now, if you're looking at this and you're like, yeah, Kara, I don't like that. You can cover the whole thing up. That is not a problem. It's not that big of a deal. You could paint this from a white canvas. I just don't like to do that for the most part. We do it for classes because of time and money, and we'd have to charge more for classes if we were to prep all of your canvases this way. But I think it just makes a nice difference. And so if you look at that close up, you can see some of the red that is just kind of barely peeking through. Now, if you're an edge painter, you're going to want to go ahead and take that over on the side. I am not usually, so I'm not going to. And I'm just going to grab a little bit more of that purple. Maybe add it in a couple of other little places. Maybe soften some places. Okay, so I've got that going on. Now, there are splatters up here, which are the colors of our flowers. The reason that I'm going to splatter now is so that if something gets here and I don't have to cover this all up, it's not a big deal. I'm going to cover it up anyways. So I like to go ahead and splatter at this stage. So you'll clean your brush. And then you're going to splatter with, and I'm going to flip him over so he doesn't get more splatters on him. And it works best if you kind of wet down your orange. Now I'm just taking a really wet brush from my water bucket, and then I'm just going to splatter, hitting it across my hand. I got a really big piece, and I'm going to take him out. One of those like paint boogers, as we call them. Okay, so there's some orange. Then I'm going to clean my brush. And I'm going to go get some of that yellow. My dogs are making noises. I don't know what their deal is. I think she's sleeping, having a dream. Okay, I'm adding a little bit of white to this just so that it'll cover up better since it's going on these colors. And see, it's getting in here, and it's not a big deal. And if you, again, let's say you don't like this, although most people really like the splatter, but if you don't like that in the background, you don't have to do it. So that's the beauty of art. So you can choose what you want to incorporate and what you don't want to incorporate. Now, what else is in there? There's a little black actually splattered back there. So we're going to do a little black. So I'm going to clean off my brush, get the yellow off of it, go into the black. And so what it is I've taken all the colors of the flower, which is the orange, the yellow, and then there's a little black in the middle, and just incorporated that in the back. So what this may be is the continuation of the field behind him, and you're just seeing parts of it through the sky. I don't know. I just thought it needed it. It's not in the picture. I just liked it. That's where you get to use some artistic license, if you will. Okay, so I have those colors just splattered throughout. You can still see some of that red poking through. You can still see the purple and the Bahama. And then you've got those other colors with you. Now, we are going to get ready to just work on our panda for a little bit. We'll skip around a bit just because of how this is going to work, but all right. So first things first. I don't know why I did that. I grabbed black first. We're not going to do that because that'll just make things harder. So what we're going to do is grab some of our white. Again, when I pull from white, if you've been in any of my classes, I have like a dirty side and a clean side. So that way when I need white, I can get it. And when I need something that just is lighter, I can pull from that dirty side. Okay. So we're going to think about where our little panda is. And so he's going to go right up to where that line was. And we're going to cover that up so you can't see it anymore. And you can do this from this, or you can use your picture and just go off the picture and paint what you see. Because that can be very powerful. Is the way I see it can be very different from the way you see it. And so I'm just going to come in here and add some white. I don't want this to dry on me. So I may not, if you're a slow painter, I don't recommend doing the whole thing. I'm going to grab a little bit of that raw sienna, because if you look, we've got some kind of a yellowy browny tinge as our shadowy color. So I'm just going to add that, and I want to do that while it's wet so it's not super dark, because he's not brown. He just has some darker elements. And like right here in his head is quite a bit darker, kind of right between and above his eyes. So I'm going to focus more right in there. Your brush strokes, they kind of just go back and forth. You can add a little bit of a diagonal like I'm doing right here, but I don't want you to click, 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 try to make little bitty fur. You can do that if that is what makes your heart happy. That's just not what makes my heart happy, and I don't want to do that. He's also pretty dark on this side of his eye. So if you'll notice, he's a little bit darker right there. So I'm going to kind of focus on that. Still has quite a bit of white in my brush. The weather while I'm filming this is like so dreary and dark, but I have my ring light up as high as it'll go. So hopefully you're seeing the light pretty well. And I'm kind of doing this everywhere. You'll notice that he has very white places. That's done after. So those highlights are put on after he kind of dries a little bit. Just kind of keep that in mind as you're doing this as well. Okay, so that's his face, right? And yes, there's black underneath there. And if you can really see whatever's underneath there, you may want to add a little bit more white and it'll kind of camouflage that. And then his little body back here is pretty brown from what we can see in the picture. So I'm just going to go in mostly with just that raw sienna. You kind of have to add a little white to it to get it to ground and cover. And so I'm wondering if I add a little black, if that'll actually darken him. Yeah, I added just the tiniest amount of black, and that just darkens it up a hair. No pun intended. Okay. And so this is his face and this is his body that we can see. And it all comes to make more sense later. So I have that little bit of darker raw sienna that I had added black to. I'm just going to add it here in some of these areas again. It's a little darker here at the edge too, just because you've got the shadows from what the flowers are leaving. I don't know why Alexa stopped playing music. Alexa, play some fun music.
Here's a playlist you might like. Happy Modern Pop on Amazon Music.
I don't know if that's what I would have chosen. Right underneath here is also a little bit of body, and I'm just going to kind of I added a little bit of black to my brush, and I'm just going to kind of add that down here in this section. It doesn't really have a stop point. The flowers are going to kind of take up most of that, but it does have a little bit more of a difference than just black. A little bit more black to that. And that's just kind of like his undercarriage, his neck kind of area that's poking through. That's a little too gray, so I'm going to wipe off my brush. I don't want quite that dark and gray in there. Now I'm going to go get more white and more of the raw sienna, and I'm just going to finish out around his eyes. And this is where, let's say you had made your eyes too big. All you have to do is kind of cut in with that color and it'll cover that right up. Or if you made them too small, just let that be and adjust as you go around. And I just kind of play with that. That got a little small, but I can always enlarge it when I actually do the black of his nose. But this is not, we're not trying to make a bunch of straight lines, okay? So just keep that in mind. This is supposed to be soft and kind of subtle and play around here. So even where this goes to this, I'm just gonna like rub my brush around there so it's a softer line. Same thing where the face goes to the body. I'm just gonna kind of work my brush there so that there's no harsh lines there, because that harsh lines aren't fun. Or I don't think that they're fun. Okay, so that's kind of our base of our head. And it's a little darker than it looks in general. And that's just so that we can build upon that. And if any of those colors in the background peek through, it's not a big deal. If you'll see, there's just a little bit of that red underlying coming through. It just adds kind of an underlying depth of warmth. I don't get concerned about that. I get more concerned when it's just white poking through and it doesn't really make sense to anything. I'm going to switch to my smaller brush again and do our ears and our nose and our eyes. Okay, so I'm going to take the black and I'm going to make it through here. Now, these ears are pretty black. If you look at them, they are pretty black, but on the edges, they're a little softer where the white hair kind of pulls up. So we're going to kind of use that to our advantage. We're going to paint this black. Okay. I'm not making super flat, straight lines. I'm not doing this dink and around. Kind of just feathering that in. Same thing over here. And I am covering up the whole line that I made. And I'm gonna go through here. focusing the black on the, especially right here at the top. And I'm just gonna kind of feather that in so it's not super straight. Same thing here. First, I just kind of get it on there, covering up that peanut shape. I'm working pretty fast just so that things don't dry before we can make some adjustments to them. And this part isn't what's important because we're gonna make fur and hair and all that kind of stuff. Now, I kind of made his nose a little smaller than I meant to, so I'm gonna elongate that outside of those lines just a hair. Which will pull in a little bit of lighter colors, which I'm not that worried about. Now I'm gonna clean my brush. While this is wet, I'm gonna take a little white and raw sienna. And right here, I'm just gonna rub it back and forth so that it softens this line. Okay, and it also kind of adds a little bit of a shadow right there. And then I can kind of play with that. That's a little too white. And I play so that I'm not just stopping. If you just stop, it doesn't have this nice interest right there. So kind of take that out if you need to. And you just play with that until things start to look more realistic, okay? Now, if you wanted to do a few little furry hairs, you could. It's not really that important because it's not really shown in the picture like that. But I mean, if you wanted to, where's my liner brush? I wouldn't go crazy, but if you like wanted to make a few little furry guys, you definitely could do that. I wouldn't go nuts and make him like some weird long haired, like those crazy eyelashes that you see right now that everybody thinks looks amazing. They don't, just FYI. Okay. Again, I'm going to clean that brush off, go into the white with the raw sienna and just lighten that up and soften the line here. And then let's say you got too much. Like I just had a little too much paint. I'm not loving how this is looking. I just clean my brush. I dry it off really good. And I'm just going to go in here with a brush that doesn't have paint on it and kind of rub right here at the edge to soften that up. And then it still is a little too much. So I'm just going to rub some white right here to soften that up. And you just kind of have to zhuzh it. There's no other word for that but zhuzhing. You just zhuzh it until things start to come together, okay? And you're just making layers upon layers upon layers. The worst thing you can do is not layer. And then your painting has no interest. So don't be afraid to keep adding some. Okay. Now, eyes. These do have a little bit more black to them that have these like little furry things. I actually do that later because we're going to do these highlights here in a minute. And you see how this is over the highlight to kind of give it to stand out a little bit more. So I'm not that worried about it. I'm going to leave these lines kind of as they are. If you're concerned that you're going to have too heavy of a line, you can hit it just to like give you some of that a sense that it's not going to be a harsh edge, but that is certainly not necessary. And there's really no reason to do it because we're going to do it later. Okay. So this should be tacky dry. If you kind of touch it and it feels a little sticky to the touch, but it's not like coming straight off of the canvas, it's plenty dry enough that you can add the highlights. So all I'm going to do is take some white, and the areas that I saw in the picture that were a lot lighter were especially right here at the top of the head, right here at the corner of this eye. I'm just making little strokes, nothing crazy. I don't have a ton of paint on my brush, just a little bit. There's a little bit of a highlight right here, kind of between the eyes. So you can go in there and do a little bit of that. There's a little bit above the nose. And kind of that comes up here under the cheek area. And then I like to do a little bit right here above the eye, and then where the face is different than the body, I'm gonna add a little bit there. Maybe need a little bit on that side too. And then if you look at him here, again, we have lightness. We have lightness. We have some lightness here. We probably could do maybe just a little bit right there. With a little lightness on the edge. Maybe a little bit right here. But that's pretty much it. Okay, so we're, again, not overthinking this, but yes, thinking about it a little bit. Now, if you feel like your black just looks so black, you could add a little bit of the white here and there on parts of this, just so that it has a little bit of tonal difference within that black. It's not like super necessary, but it will kind of soften the edges a little bit. Same thing here, like if you wanted to add just a little bit of like barely any white, but just a little bit, and it just kind of helps cover everything up a little bit. Okay, now let's go do some flowers. And again, if I'm going too fast, just pause, finish up your panda, and then we'll come back. And we're going to come back and add his little like eyeballs and that kind of stuff. Nostrils, depending on how the flower covers up things. So when I do my flowers, I tend to do the darkest color, and then I work to the lightest, and then I add another little darkness to it. I just feel like it gives more interest. So we're going to be using orange with a little yellow, orange with a little white probably, some yellow with white, and then a little of the raw sienna just to give you some earthier tones in there. And then we'll come back later and do the black that's in the center of these. So the orange on itself is kind of a bummer. So I'm going to show you what I mean. See how you can see through it? It's very transparent. Move that a little closer. I don't like that. That's one of the reasons orange is not my favorite. So if you mix the barest amount of white in with your orange, what it does is it doesn't adjust the color that much. I put a little bit in here, but it will cover a little bit better. It's not great, but it's better than nothing. And I am making these flowers. Now, you'll notice I'm not making C's. I like a more angular flower. So I make marks, for lack of a better term. And I'm making sure that I'm covering up past where the circle is. And I don't cover up everything. I'm just getting some of that orange in each of these flowers. Okay. And the more expensive your paint, the more your orange will cover. I believe that one was probably done with golden paints at the studio in Perry. But any orange will do. You just have to kind of make it work for you. And then if you want to ever invest in really good paints, I love golden. They're my favorite. And so you'll see, I'm just making marks, like straight lines in different directions. Almost like kind of a hexagon or maybe even an octagon in some ways. I'm just making sure I'm covering up the circle. And right now it's gonna look like a big, weird orange blob. It's supposed to. This is where it's kind of going through its awkward years. Okay. So I've got orange now in all of this. I'm going to take some of that orange, mix it with some of the yellow, and make, I would call this marigold. Remove that. Making kind of this marigold color. All it does is kind of, this is a really cool yellow. We're adding the orange. It kind of makes a warm yellow or a lighter orange. And I'm just going to do that. Now, if I started to do this and couldn't tell any difference, then you could mix a little bit more white in with it, and that's also going to cover better too. And I'm not thinking about this. So you'll notice I'm not holding my pen or my brush down here like a pen. I'm just holding it comfortably. This is a long brush and I'm down a little bit. And I'm not staying just in the same places. I'm not thinking about this flower matches this flower. Sometimes I would pay attention, like if this was all about the flower, I would pay more attention to where the highlights on the flower are on the picture, but this is more about the pandas. I'm just painting. And typically when you paint like this, it looks a lot more free and fun and natural. And if you think about where every single stroke is, it will look like you thought about it. And I say that a lot in class to people, not as like a discouraging thing, but to tell you that next time maybe try and think about it a little less and see, A, if you have more fun, and B, if your painting just looks better and more natural. I paint a lot of flowers. They're an organic plant, organic bean, and organic beans aren't perfect. And I'm just thinking about each flower individually and adding this, you know, warmy kind of yellow, light orange color. Okay. It is raining hard now. All right. So we've got those colors. Now, we want to do some yellow next. I'm going to take that yellow. The yellow on its own is pretty transparent, so I'm going to add a little bit of white. And when I do that, it makes it kind of this lemony yellow color. And I'm going to use this a little bit more sparingly. So I'm going to hold my brush even farther back and just kind of rub here and there and see what happens. And you don't have to stay within that shape. You can kind of make a few strokes outside. So like right there, you can kind of go a little bit outside. Doesn't have to be perfect. Some of them can have a lot of this. Some of them may not have very much. Hopefully we do not lose internet in the middle of this class because it is storming. Okay, so I'm just working my way around. Again, trying not to think about holding it way out here so I'm not tempted to like be too controlling. Everybody is always so intimidated by these flowers, but it's like, I like them because you're not supposed to think about them. You're just supposed to paint. As long as you keep straight lines going in different directions, that's all we're looking for right there. Now, I'm going to add a little bit more white to that yellow so that it is like a pale yellow. So a little bit more white into that color that we just did. And just adding little bits and pieces of that. Doesn't have to be perfect. Doesn't have to go anywhere specific. We just want some really nice highlight areas. And again, you can kind of go outside of where that flower was. And it's a little harder to read down here because this is where the red was. But that's going to get covered up in a minute with some black. So I'm not super worried about where those flowers end and don't end. Okay. So then I just want to see that everything got something. Okay, and that there's orange and light orange and yellow and light yellow and even lighter yellow, all within this flower. Okay. Now, we're going to take the black because if you look at this, it's real dark right here in some of these areas. So where it's green, I may just let it be. Okay, so like over here in this area, I have some green. I may just leave that and add more green there. But then like down here where it's red, I'm gonna go ahead and go in there and get some of those and make it black. And you just gonna have to look at yours. They're all gonna be a little different. So I'm gonna make a little bit of black right there. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm going up to those flowers to kind of reshape them. Let's say you made a really weird shaped flower. So let's say this one was weird shaped. We can just cut into it. And make that dark, okay? So don't be afraid to like reshape some things. Just keep it angular when you do it. And then if something looks really weird, you'll just put a leaf on it later. I know that's very Bob Ross-esque of me. And maybe add a little bit here. And then if you're going to paint your edges, you can kind of go in there and see what needs to be what and where. I don't really like that, so I am going to cover that up. It would have been fine green, but I don't love it. I want a little bit, maybe right in here, to break up some of those flowers. Again, doesn't have to be perfect. We're gonna put greenery in this too. But if you find a place that maybe just could use a little bit of depth, you can just add it in there, and see what happens. And I actually am thinking that I might have painted this earlier in the original, because this even has some splatter. And if you wanted to add that splatter now, you could do that. And that may be what I did last time too, because I remember these had splatter on them. Like you could take, you don't want to move it around because this is still wet, but you could take a picture paper, and like just kind of like lay it on there. And then you can use your brush to splatter, like this has some yellow splattered. And you can just splatter that. Just wetting that color down so it'll splatter nice. And then that's it. Okay. And then all I'll do is pick this straight up. And yes, it has some paint on it, but it didn't affect my panda in any way, which is good. Alright, now back to that smaller brush. We're gonna go in and lay in our black. Okay, so the flowers have these dark interiors. So we want to do that. Now, they're not all straight smack dab in the middle like a nipple. So I want you to get that out of your head. So like I like to look at my flowers and kind of see. So like right here, it's a little darker right down here. So I'm going to add the dark there. Here, it's a little darker and I'll just kind of stick it in the middle. But I'm also not making circles. I'm kind of just dabbing. And I do this fast. I'm not trying to overthink that. And it may be that this is picking up more color or something. That's fine too. But each of these flowers should have some little darkness in them. So like, I just kind of look around and make sure that all of these flowers have something. Okay, I'm gonna let that area kind of dry and I'm gonna go work on my little face. So I'm gonna take my liner brush and a little bit of white and I'm gonna wet my white down. And my white isn't like squeaky clean white, just so you're aware of that. It's not that big of a deal at this point, but it's white-ish. And then I'm gonna think about where his eyes go. And so I don't want it to be a full circle. I don't want to draw a lot of attention to it because in the photo, you don't even really see the eyeballs, but I want them to be there. So I'm going to take this and make kind of like a curvy U. And then on this side, I'm going to do the same thing. Kind of like a curvy U. Again, they don't have to match. They don't have to be exactly the same. And then I'm going to put a shine, which is just basically a mark in there. And then I often like to touch it so it's not so perfect. Okay. Then I'm going to go directly into the black. You may need to wet this down too, just a little bit so that your brush will work for you and not against you. And all I'm going to do is take that and make some little tiny hairs. I'm just starting inside of here and flicking out so that the little hairs go over what's there. And you got to kind of think about direction of hair growth on this. And so I kind of, at the top of his eye, I start to go down this way. On the top of that, I start to go down this way. And it's not supposed to be like really long, flowy hairs. It's a lot smoother than that. Again, on this side, I go around, kind of around and down. And then on this side, I start to go around this way. Just making tiny little hairs all the way around. Let's say your flower here didn't kind of really cover up your nose very well and you had space that you should do nostrils. You can take your white again and kind of make a little bit of a nostril situation happen. I don't really think it's super necessary, but I'm going to soften that up just a little bit so it's not so glaringly light. And same thing on the edges here. If it seems like it needs to be a little softened right there so that it's not such a stark contrast between the nose and the face, sometimes I'll kind of go in there and just like softly rub it with some black so that the line is a little softer. And then if you're looking, sometimes you'll look at your painting and you're like, I feel like some of my highlights disappeared or settled too much or something. You can go in here and you can add a little bit more if you need to. Just be careful because this is going to be wet. But just know you can keep adding. Layers are good. All right. Now, let's go make some leaves and add a little bit of greenery. And what that does is it's kind of also move your eye around the canvas. These are not specific leaves. So you don't need to go doink, doink, and make like a full leaf. It's basically just put in there without a whole lot of thought. No, I did not put that on my palette for some reason. This is that dark green. It's called Hooker's Green. And you just need a tiny bit of that. And let's say you want that green a little darker. You could add a tiny bit of black to that green and it makes it a little darker. A little bit more, even a little bit more kind of hunter's green, if you will. And then I have the hunter's green and a little bit of yellow. And then I'm just gonna kind of add here and there. I don't think about it too much, just kind of where I feel like things need it. If an area seems a little awkward, I will put it in there. I put quite a bit in the bottom part here, but I don't want to cover up all those juicy splatters, so I won't put it everywhere. And like this area was kind of weird and awkward. So I'm gonna kind of place quite a bit of green there. You can add green. You can add green over your flower. There's nobody stopping you from doing that. So like right here, I have not a lot of space, but maybe I want some of the green through there, and then maybe a little bit here. And a little bit here. And so sometimes it has quite a bit of yellow. Sometimes it doesn't have a lot of yellow. It's more green. Just play. That's the best advice I can give you in here. Now, I'm going to take that color. It's got green. It's got a little yellow. It's got, and I put a little Bahama on it. I like Bahama with green. It just adds this fun highlight that almost gives it an ashy look to it, like it's an ashier leaf. And I just add a little bit to my flower, to my leaves. Now, it's not a lot. I'm not trying to cover up everything that I did. It's more of like an accent. And again, notice the placement of my hands. I'm not holding it down here and gripped. I'm doing it a lot softer than that. Now, I'm looking at this thinking, I wish I had a little bit more contrast to these flowers. So this is where I'm going to go in and get some of that raw sienna. I'm going to have a little bit mixed with white just so that it grounds it down a little bit. And then I'm going to come in here and add another element to these flowers. Now, I do want to be careful when I'm doing this that I don't get into the black and smear the black everywhere. And I don't want these flowers to be completely muted. So I don't want it everywhere, just a little bit. And if you accidentally grab a little of that black, don't freak out about it. Just clean your brush and move on. Okay. So I've added a little bit of that to kind of tone it down. And now I'm going to get some of my white. And I'm going to add a little highlight. Now, sometimes it may go out the box, out the flower. And I don't have a ton of white left. I don't want to really pour more. So I'm just kind of using what I have that's got mixed stuff in it. And I'm not super worried about it. And I just think about each flower individually and not as a grouping. So I don't like just make marks from flower to flower. Okay, so hopefully that was a fun lesson. I hope that you got something out of that as like the panda is not black and white. There's lots of shades within him. The flowers are not orange and black. They have lots of shades amongst them. The leaves are not green. They're green and yellow and Bahama, and they have a lot going on. So if at any point you think I'm going to paint a painting on my own, and you start just using one color in a place, I want you to think about that and think, does it need like a really soft blended edge with like white? Or does it need a really soft blended edge with a darker tone? Or does it just need to have some wild, crazy colors added in? It'll just make your painting a lot more interesting, a lot more fun, and just not so flat looking. And so hopefully you learned a lot through that. When we talk about value in class, you'll understand that a little bit more. And then be ready for next month. I haven't decided what our challenge for that will be. We might work on composition. I haven't figured that out, but we did a little bit of that with the layout. But hopefully you're liking these monthly kind of challenges, as I like to call them. If you are watching this and you are not in Lush Club, I highly encourage you to join. It's $99 for the year. You get 20% off of your classes, plus you get a free virtual class a month. So this lesson, the Lush Club members got for free. If you are already a Lush Club member, thank you so much. You have no idea how that has helped us, especially this last year. And we look forward to providing this service for a long time. But we do need people in our classes to do so. So if you're watching this and you haven't been in studio, it's getting safer and safer whenever you feel safe after you've had your vaccinations, if that's been what is holding you back. We would love to see you in studio because that's kind of where all the magic happens, as they say. All right, I'm going to take you down from here and kind of show you a little bit closer what's happening here. And if you have any questions, just let me know. Also, if you would, we would love to see your version of this. You can place it on the Lush Art community. It's a free Facebook group that we have, and you can get some encouragement and just show off your work because I'm sure it's wonderful. All right, thank you so very much.